Thank you, Alessandra, and the Translation Manchester team for asking me to come and speak today. I'll try my best to keep to time, but I'm going to talk a little bit about iMATCH, which is Innovate Manchester Advanced Therapy Centre Hub. So iMATCH is all about advanced therapies, as you might guess, so that's cell and gene therapy and tissue engineering. And we know already that these offer unprecedented promise in terms of medical advances. And in the last few years, we've seen things like CAR-T move through from clinical trials into the clinical setting. And about 4 years ago now, it was recognised that the UK had an opportunity to be a global hub of activity. As is often the case in the UK, much of the early scientific discovery work had been very well done in the UK, but there was a need to really take that step into clinical, to scale up activity, to interact between commercial and NHS to deliver these really complex therapies at scale, rather than just small academic trials. So recognition that it's a complex multi-step process. We need to procure the tissue, we need to potentially manufacture, we need to give that tissue back to patients, often on an autologous basis, and there's enormous coordination required for that. So Innovate UK decided to fund a network across the UK called the Advanced Therapy Treatment Centre Network. And in end of 2017, there was a funding call for 3 UK centres, and we applied as part of that and became iMATCH, one of the 3 centres. So you can see in this slide, the other 2 centres are Northern Alliance and Midland and Wales, and they're much more geographically dispersed. So I think one of our strengths actually was that by being focused on Manchester, we were concentrated in one area, and kind of that co-location has really helped the interaction and delivery. So the idea behind it, this isn't a research grant as such, it's around developing systems to allow routine delivery. These therapies are always going to be more complex, but if we can have the infrastructure in place that it's just another cell therapy protocol, then and that we can develop the kind of translational aspects of that, then that had to be a good thing. So we've worked really strongly as a network over the last 4 years, coordinated by Cell and Gene Therapy Catapult, and we've had, approaching 400 people working on the programme. We've worked in collaboration. London wasn't one of the centres selected, but did have separate funding for London Advanced Therapies. And that started off as more of an academic collaboration where obviously there's great strength in London with the academic work going on. Whereas the ATTC Network is more about that pulling through research and then scaling up delivery. And so the idea was to develop exemplars across the network that would allow us to share best practice, increase patient access, develop technology such as the clinical trials databases that are fit for purpose for these sorts of technologies, and ultimately make the UK an attractive place both to run clinical trials, but for adoption and for commercial partners to want to work with NHS and academia in this field. And so iMATCH, we have, I think it's 14 partners now. Part of the funding was stipulated that half of the activity had to be within our commercial partners. We had to have an SME, a developer of advanced therapies, a logistics commercial partner, but also clinical sites and academic partners. So the University of Manchester is the academic partner, and we now have 7 delivery sites actually across the 3 main centres. So the Christie NHS Foundation Trust, Manchester University Foundation Trust were the 2 original partners, and since in the last year or so we've been joined by Salford. So in the yellow box, you can see there some of the activities that we've focused on around things like coordination of patient sample, processing and storage, developing standard practices for that, ensuring that we have adequate track and trace solutions for our clinical samples from when we go from procurement and the patient through the logistics, manufacture, logistics back to clinical site and delivery. We've done a huge amount of education, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, and created things like bespoke databases and scale up in the clinical setting, so training and education in the clinical setting. Here's our partners. Probably not time now to go through all of the commercial partners, but they include, for example, Actors Clinical was a spin-out CRO company from spun out from AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca remain one of our partners, non-funded, and in fact they actually helped support iMATCH through funding of digital experimental cancer medicine team and some of the work we've done there with things like cytokine analysis, validation of cytokine analysis, and AI technology to look at early warning indicators of some of the toxicities that occur with cell therapies. Cytiva logistics team, we've worked with them actually in terms of developing new liquid nitrogen free storage and technology that will actually assist going forward as we scale up activity. Liquid nitrogen tanks are big, they're bulky, they have to be in special places with an outside wall where they can be refilled, and working with Cytiva is helping us to think about how we move forward to scale up activity in Manchester and beyond. Instill Bio, you may recognise as originally a spin-out company from University of Manchester, but now spun out completely and actually is a large multinational now looking particularly at tumour infiltrating lymphocyte therapy, with sites both now manufacturing in Manchester, coming from the Manchester site, but also at Alderley Park where they're developing their RNI facilities, and obviously maintaining strong links and shared PhDs. Although iMATCH is around scaling up of activity and delivery, there's that pull through of well-established collaborations mean that we can look to develop the research platform as well. This is one example of some of the work that's pulled through some of that academic work that Manchester is particularly strong in. So I've mentioned we worked with Digital ECMT and Caroline Dabb's biomarker group to develop cytokine arrays that are now validated within the clinical labs to look for rapid turnaround assessment of toxicities for patients receiving cell therapy. And that early warning feature of trying to identify patients developing toxicity early in a more mobile way, we've looked through translational wearable technology for that. And took that actually from the CAR-T setting into the COVID setting. And because the infrastructure was already in place to do that in the CAR-T setting, we were rapidly able to shift actually with the support of Innovate UK into a trial called Cosmic-19 in the COVID setting. And there's spin-outs developed from each of those that allow you to take the next step. So again, I'm not going to touch on all of these, but you'll see there's kind of areas across the whole network of interest in things like standardization of best practice, digital and data, institutional readiness that allow us to kind of pull through and be kind of institutionally fit to take on some of the clinical trials that can emerge and help to move from the laboratory base into the clinical setting. And one example is in our education portfolio. So in iMATCH, we focus particularly on developing our ATMP MSc programme, as well as educational meetings across iMATCH, but our ATMP MSc is just thinking about training the future experts. But one of the things we've done as a network is to develop e-learning modules within the e-learning for health platform. And there's now 5 or 6 rolled out with more to come. So I think the next slide just shows that. Yeah, so these are free to access. And if you log on to e-learning for health, you just have to register, but then you can see what all the different modules are, going from CAR-T to non-CAR-T gene modified T cells to gene therapy, and also some of the more practical things like how we safely transport cells in liquid nitrogen. The ATTC network has really grown. So one of the advantages of having iMATCH based in Manchester allows us to link out to the whole network. And one of the really successful things has been the industry advisory group, where there's more than 60 commercial partners now within that industry advisory group that is across the whole network. So here's some of the the partners, and it allows us access to those who have an interest, whether it's in development of advanced therapies or logistics or some of the other aspects that I've touched on already. And there's a whole network now across the UK of both NHS and other organisations, including things like NICE and the MHRA, which as a network means we can access advice at a much more senior level than we would be able to if we went as individuals. So iMATCH came into existence in 2018. We've got about 15 work packages ongoing, and I'm happy to kind of share our standard slide deck, perhaps the easiest way, rather than going through all of those individually. We had funding that originally was due to complete a year ago, but we got an extension for both some what we called runway projects, but also to allow for COVID delays. And sadly now our current funding from Innovate UK is due to finish at the end of this month. We have some bridging funding while we're waiting to hear if Innovate UK will release more funding. They're still deciding after the delayed spending review. So we have funding till September to continue our work. And beyond that, hopefully, even if we don't get core funding, we're looking already to work with partners like GSK, looking at things like patient-reported outcome and some of our other wearable technology. So looking to external funding to support that. So I'll stop talking about iMATCH there. The other thing I just wanted to mention, I wear many hats, and one of them is our Manchester Immuno-Oncology Network. So this came out because of a realization actually that in immune oncology, many people had interest, but interest and work was popping up in fairly disparate ways. And to try and bring together both scientists and clinicians to understand what was happening across the field. So in Manchester, we now have around 400 members, with 100 of those people have submitted biographies so that we can try and match people up if there's questions come through about, oh, how do I contact a clinician who's got an interest in melanoma, for example, and clinicians wanting to contact scientists. We run quarterly meetings, and they have been virtual, but I'm pleased to say our first, hopefully, touch wood, face-to-face meeting will be back face-to-face in May. So if you're interested, just email the generic email address and we can send you links to register for that. And there'll be future meetings as well if you want to register, just to get those in your inboxes. So I'm going to stop talking there. I'll stop screen share, but Alessandra, I'll hand back to you, and I'm very happy to take any questions. Hopefully that's given you a flavour of what iMATCH does and how we can potentially, if there's people out there, we can link up some of the infrastructure that we've developed.